Have you ever looked at a photo and realized something was wrong? A smile that shouldn't be there, a shadow that doesn't have a real person, a hand in the wrong place? Welcome to Darkness Tells, where the smallest details can reveal the most horrifying truths. In this series, we're not just recounting haunting photos found before tragedy, but the last moments of the living before they were erased from existence. From the frozen Missouri River that hides an underground city to a fateful slip that opens the door to an ancient entity. It's not about one person, it's about an entire memory being rewritten. If you dare to look into the place where mirrors no longer reflect people, subscribe now, because once the story begins, it might be watching you. Harry Randall has always lived with the pride and determination that only those who have experienced war can have. At 72 years old, Harry no longer has the strong physique of an American soldier who fought bravely in the Pacific Theater, but his spirit has never been defeated by time. Perhaps that is why he decided to attach his life to Spirit Lake and the small lodge located at the foot of Mount St. Helens in Washington state, where nature is both charming and carries a silent threat. In the late spring days of 1980, when geologists issued serious warnings about the possibility of Mount St. Helens awakening after a sleep that lasted more than a century, the whole area quickly fell into a state of panic. People began to evacuate. Many hastily packed their most precious items to leave the place they called home. But among the crowd of people leaving, there was still one person standing still, despite all the warnings. That person was Harry Randall. No one in the area did not know Harry. The old man with white hair and sparkling blue eyes was always a symbol of toughness. He owned a small lodge near Spirit Lake, where for more than 50 years Harry had welcomed nature lovers, people looking for peace or simply a few days away from the hustle and bustle of the outside world. And now when St. Helens suddenly shook with small waves, when the sound of explosions and the faint steam rising from the crater like the breath of a creature slowly awakening, he still just smiled and told anyone who stopped by to advise him. No one can chase Harry off his mountain. If this mountain wants to collapse, I will be here to see it through to the end. It was his stubbornness that attracted a lot of attention from the media. Reporters from all over America flocked to Spirit Lake, hoping to get one last interview with the stubborn man. In front of the cameras, Harry would laugh loudly, showing his teeth that were slightly discolored from smoking, and declared defiantly to nature, "A volcano? Let it come. I survived the bombings of Okinawa. A mountain can't hurt me." But hidden beneath that arrogant smile were small moments where, if you paid close attention, you would see a flicker of anxiety in Harry's blue eyes. One weekend evening, just a few days before his fate struck, Harry sat quietly on the shore of Spirit Lake. The huge shadow of Mount St. Helens reflected on the calm lake like a menacing ghost, and he suddenly felt strange thoughts stirring in his heart that he had never had before. A vague sense of unease crept into his heart, but Harry quickly dismissed it with a few sips of bitter whiskey and laughed to himself, hoarsely saying that he wasn't afraid. At that moment, the phone in the motel rang repeatedly. Harry slowly walked in and picked up the phone. On the other end of the line was the worried voice of his niece, Alice Randall, 24 years old, living in Seattle. "Uncle Harry, please leave. The news says the mountain will explode at any moment. I beg you to leave, at least until it's safe." Harry was silent for a moment, then smiled gently and said, "Alice, I've lived long enough to know that you can't run away from your destiny. If it comes, it comes. I'm not afraid. I promise it'll be fine." The call ended, leaving Alice more uneasy than before. She couldn't have known. That was the last time she heard his deep voice. On the morning of May 18th, 1980, the sky above Mount St. Helens suddenly darkened, as if a rage had been brewing in the earth, waiting for this moment to erupt. A huge explosion tore through the silence of the morning, shaking the sky violently. And then, a terrible landslide, the largest in history, swept away the entire northern slope of the mountain. At Spirit Lake, Harry woke up with a start. The last photo anyone had of him was of him standing outside the lodge, a proud smile on his lips, unaware that in just a few minutes, both he and his small world would be erased forever. As the columns of smoke and ash reached the sky at the speed of a bullet train, Harry suddenly understood that all his imagination of safety was an illusion. He stood frozen, eyes wide as the disaster rolled in. And in that moment between life and death, something even more terrifying happened. Harry heard a whisper, soft but clear, in his ear, as if someone were standing right next to him. "We've been waiting for you, Harry." Harry spun around. There was no one, but he could have sworn he'd felt a cold hand on his shoulder. A chill ran through his body. In that moment, a chilling realization hit him, and he realized he wasn't as alone in Spirit Lake as he'd thought. Something had always been there. Here, something ancient, more terrifying than the volcano, waiting to awaken with the mountain. Before Harry could scream, a fiery ash cloud engulfed the lodge, engulfing him. In his final moments, he no longer had time to think about his fear of volcanoes. What terrified him most was the realization that, long before St. Helens had raged, something far more terrible had been dwelling here, and now it had escaped, ready to spread to other places in search of other people. As the ash settled completely, Spirit Lake vanished as if it had never existed. The lodge, the memories, and Harry Randall himself all became part of the mountain. But somewhere in the thick smoke, that whisper still echoed, soft and chillingly cold. "We've been waiting for you, Harry, and now we're waiting for the next one." The story of Harry Randall is not just about a stubborn man facing nature, but also about the true horror lurking in the shadow of a disaster. And the most terrifying thing has yet to be fully revealed. On December 27, 2022, a seemingly ordinary photo posted to Instagram became the starting point for one of the most mysterious and haunting disappearances in Missouri history. In the photo, a young man named Kyle Henderson was standing on the ice covering the Missouri River. He raised his camera to take a selfie with a bright smile, his long brown hair tousled by the wind. Behind him, bare trees and thick fog that obscured much of the horizon. The photo caption was just one line: "Freedom is knowing you're small in nature." Just a few hours later, Kyle disappeared without a trace. Kyle Henderson, 27, is a semi-professional explorer who has trekked through the Amazon, skied in the Rockies, and spent the winter alone in Yellowstone National Park. He is famous on social media for his mesmerizing nature photos and his philosophy of living close to the wild. Those who know Kyle say he always prepares carefully for each trip, but strangely, this time he acted differently, not announcing his specific itinerary, not bringing a satellite device, and especially not leaving any last words other than that photo. At 2:13 p.m., Kyle sent his last text message to his sister, Ellie Henderson. "The ice is unusually beautiful today. Something is wrong, but maybe I'm just too sensitive." After that message, his phone went dead. When night fell and there was still no contact, Ellie began to worry. She called the police the next morning and drove to where Kyle had checked in, a remote stretch of river about 40 minutes outside Jefferson City. Kyle's pickup truck was still there, parked on its side at the edge of the river. The door was open, the keys were in the ignition, and the camera bag was on the passenger seat, but Kyle was not there. On the ice, the rescue team found long, winding skid marks that ended in a crack about 6 feet wide. But there was no blood, no debris. Divers and sonar searched for 3 days straight, but found no body. Every trace had been erased by the river itself. 3 days later, Ellie received an anonymous package. Inside was a printout of the selfie Kyle had posted before he disappeared, but with a detail that was not in the original. Behind Kyle, in the mist, stood the shadowy silhouette of a woman in a white dress, motionless. Her long hair covered most of her face, but her eyes, dim as black holes, stared straight into the camera. Ellie was stunned. She checked her Instagram photos. There was no one there. How could there be a different print? And who sent it? There was a note in the envelope. "He's still here, but not like you think." From then on, Ellie was engrossed in her investigation. She went online, searched for paranormal groups, and looked up similar disappearances near the Missouri River. And then an ancient legend came up: the Ice Lady. The legend said that every 11 years, when the Missouri River froze completely, a wandering spirit appeared. It was said that she was a woman whose husband had murdered her and thrown her body into the river on a winter night. Her spirit could not rest, and every time the coldest cycle came, she would appear to find someone to go with, and that person would usually disappear forever. In 1999, a boy named Liam went missing near this stretch of river. He had also taken a selfie with a silhouette in the background. In 2011, a college student went ice skating and disappeared. His body was never found. Both disappeared in December. Ellie felt a chill down her spine. She remembered Kyle's last message. Something isn't right. Not long after, something else appeared. An old video shot from a GoPro camera mounted on a helmet, sent to Ellie's email address, which had never been made public. The video was only 42 seconds long. It began with Kyle skating on the ice, talking to the camera. Suddenly, he stopped, looking toward the edge of the woods. The camera shook slightly as he zoomed in. There, in the shadow of the trees, was a woman in a white dress. She stood still, not moving, not reacting. But seconds later, the camera faded, then went dark. In the final frame, all that was left was Kyle's whisper. "Oh my God!" There was nothing in her eyes. Ellie choked. She decided to return to the riverbank on the day Kyle went missing, a year later. She had her photo, her flashlight, and a vow. If something was holding her brother back, she would bring him back. It was snowing lightly, the river frozen solid. Ellie stepped slowly onto the ice, the flashlight shining dimly ahead. There was no sound, but as she stood where Kyle had taken the photo, a cold chill ran through her. And then she heard a familiar voice. "Ellie, don't look at her. Don't look back." She flinched. Kyle's voice, but it was clearly coming from beneath the ice, a soft crack. Ellie knelt down, pressing her ear to the ice. Cold. But there was a sound, like a whisper, like hundreds of whispers at once. She shone her light down onto the ice and saw Kyle's face beneath. He did not like the picture. His eyes were wide, his mouth twisted into a crooked smile. His hand was raised as if to break free from the ice, but was held tight by another hand, thin, pale, with long nails that touched his cheek. Ellie screamed, running back, but the ice was already cracking. A laugh, high-pitched, cold as the north wind, rang out behind her. When she turned, there was no one. But on the ice where she had been standing, there was a bare footprint, small, thin, imprinted in the thin layer of snow. She blacked out. When she woke, she was lying on a hospital chair. The police said a fisherman had found her unconscious at the edge of the river. No one believed her story. There were no marks on the ice, no cameras, no video. But Ellie knew what she saw was no hallucination. Ellie never went near the Missouri River again, but she still received letters. Every December 27th, each letter was scrawled in a single sentence. He was still smiling, but she wouldn't let him stop. And in each envelope, always a photo. An old photo, but Kyle looked different every year. Paler, eyes deeper, and a smile more distorted, as if he were becoming part of something unnameable. The Missouri River still freezes over every winter, and if you pass by on a dark afternoon in late December, be careful. Don't look into the fog, and if you see a man smiling in the middle of the ice, don't stop to take a picture. Walk away, because she's waiting for the next one. Part 3. The Failed Rescue Missouri, early January. Just days after Ellie Henderson was found unconscious on the banks of the Missouri River, the disappearance of Kyle Henderson is once again in the spotlight. But this time, it's no longer a simple accident, but a warning of something deeper, more silent, and deadlier than anyone could have imagined. Ellie's story of the woman in the mist and Kyle's pleading eyes beneath the ice, initially dismissed as paranoia, has caught the attention of a secret group called the Thin Layer Watchers. They are not government officials, not reporters, but a small group of scholars, psychics, and survivors of similar phenomena. Ellie is taken to a place that modern maps have no name for, a dilapidated cabin hidden in the Osage Forest. There she meets Ruth, an old woman with white hair and a look of quiet as if she has seen something ordinary people should not know. Beside Ruth are Lydia, an ethnologist who lost her husband on a cold winter night in 1998, And Gabe, a cryophysicist who believes that certain resonant frequencies can penetrate matter and awaken buried forms of existence. Ruth gives Ellie a map covered in ancient symbols. At the center is a black circle called the cold mirror, a place where the ice is not simply frozen water, but a barrier between two dimensions. Ellie feels every cell in her body shrink, but she does not retreat. She wants to save her brother, even if it means confronting the same nightmare that almost killed her last time. 3 days later, they returned to that river. It was minus 28 degrees Celsius that night. The wind was howling, and the fog was so thick that even flashlights could only see a few feet. They brought a frequency resonator, an infrared camera, and something Ellie never thought she would need. An old rag doll Kyle had slept with as a child, Mr. Button Eye, with a round button for a right eye. When Gabe activated the device, the sound was not a vibration, but a sharp, sobbing sound that rose from the ground. Lydia began chanting incantations in the ancient Sioux language, the words broken by the wind as they drifted into space. Ruth drew a circle of salt around Ellie, telling her not to step out, no matter what. Suddenly, the infrared camera flashed. A human shape began to emerge from beneath the blanket. The image, not a blur, but Kyle, eyes wide, hands raised as if trying to knock on the icy glass. Ellie choked, calling his name in vain. The ice began to crack, but it didn't crack. It rose, stretched like a biological membrane. "Brother, I'm here. I'll get you out." A shriek, inhuman. And then the ice broke. Ellie fell, but not into the water. She fell into a weightless void, as black as the bottom of an abyss. Before her was Kyle, but not the Kyle she knew. His eyes were pupil-less. His mouth moved wordlessly. And behind her was her. The woman in the mist, no longer shrouded in mist. She stood alone, her eyes black holes, her hair like frozen seaweed, her mouth a deep gash that stretched to her ears, from which frothed ice like solid mercury. "You can't take him. I didn't ask for your permission. I came to get my loved one back." He was the one who chose to stay. He laughed. And when someone laughs under the ice, they never want to cry again. Ellie tried to scream, but no sound came out. She placed a pale finger on Kyle's forehead. At that moment, Ellie saw it all. The victims before Kyle, Liam, the student who went missing in 1999, a woman named Claire in 1986, and a little girl in a red dress no more than 7 years old. All were trapped in this ice space, not dead, but no longer alive, pulled down to replace something else, a first soul that no one dared to name. Ellie cried. Her tears crystallized in midair. Suddenly, the Mr. Button-Eye doll, which Ruth had dropped down with the lifeline, began to glow. The light from the eye button spread out, cutting through the darkness like a knife. For a split second she screamed, a sound that stabbed Ellie's ears. Ruth dragged Ellie onto the ice. She screamed, struggled, and wanted to go back, but they couldn't. As the ice closed, all traces disappeared. No Kyle, no soul, just a circle of transparent ice, unfrozen, a silent eye watching the world above. The next day, they took the only sample they had recovered from the ice, a piece of Kyle's shirt, for testing. But the DNA results shocked everyone. It didn't match Kyle. It belonged to a man named Harvey Lansing, who had disappeared in 1969. The final twist? Ellie began to have dreams that weren't hers. She saw herself as Harvey, then Claire, then Liam. Saw them being pulled down, saw them screaming into the ice, then silence, as if she were the living memory of those trapped in the ice. And Kyle? She wasn't sure if it was him anymore, or if he had become part of her, a piece of her soul that had been inserted into a mouth that twisted and smiled every night the river froze. The rescue had failed, but worse than failure was knowing that the door was open and that something on the other side was learning to smile. Ellie had thought the nightmare had ended the night the cold mirror shattered and Kyle disappeared beneath the ice. But the price of survival wasn't freedom, it was observation. She was no longer the one to be ignored. She was a witness, and now the thing in the Missouri River was waiting again. 3 weeks after the event, Missouri was still bitterly cold. Snow covered everything. But it wasn't the cold that choked Ellie. It was the feeling of being watched. The wind whistling through her window whispered her name in a language she had heard, but never learned. Just when everyone thought time had healed the pain, a 17-year-old boy named Brandon Wolfe, a popular amateur photographer at Riverview High School, invited a group of friends to take pictures at the spot where Kyle had disappeared. Brandon loved to hunt winter sunsets. For him, the frigid Missouri was where the light was most true. The last photo Brandon posted was a smiling selfie. Behind him was a frozen river, the sun sinking his silhouette into a cold mirror. But the first person to notice the oddity wasn't Brandon's family. It was a Redditor. He zoomed in on the photo and posted a chilling comment. "Anyone see that face behind Brandon?" Right at the edge of the ice. A pale face, no eyes, no nose, just a mouth smiling from ear to ear. Hours later, Brandon was gone. The police said it was an accident. He slipped. Nobody, no blood, no fracture. All that remained was Brandon's phone, frozen, with the last photo a distorted frame, as if it had been tampered with by magnetic interference. But Ellie knew better than anyone. No one just disappears, unless the place wants to keep them. Brandon's mother, Vivian Wolfe, came to Ellie with hollow eyes. She brought a photo that Ellie had seen once that had kept her awake for 3 days. In the photo, that pale face was none other than Claire, the woman Ellie had seen in her moments when she was barely alive, the woman in the mist, the spirit keeper under the ice. Ellie immediately searched the files of the missing persons around the river. In the past 30 years, at least 73 people have disappeared during the winter, mostly in January. None have ever returned, and nearly all of them have slipped. She contacts Lydia and Gabe, the only friends who believed her after the cold mirror. Ruth, the keeper of ancient secrets, is gone. Her house is empty, and on the wall is scrawled in fingernails, "Don't come back, he's open." That night, the three of them returned to the riverbank where Brandon took his last photo. No wind, no moon, no sound. The ice is as still as a mirror. They stand still, afraid that their own breathing will wake something below. Ellie puts her hand on the ice, cold. But then it laughs. Not Kyle, not Claire. Ellie herself, but it comes from somewhere far away, echoing from below. Her voice, but hollow and colder than ice. Gabe activated the echo sounder he'd modified from the ultrasound machine. The screen showed a black and white video. Brandon was standing with his back turned. A pale hand slowly rose from the ice and rested on his shoulder. Brandon turned, and then disappeared. Lydia pulled out a small bag of human ashes, scattering them around the area as a protective ritual. She chanted the ancient Nahuatl mantras Ruth had taught them. The air around her thickened. The air felt heavy, as if gravity were increasing. The ice cracked, not collapsed, but it opened like a door, and Ellie was pulled in, not by force, but by memory. She fell, but not down. In. She opened her eyes. Before her was a city submerged in ice. Human bodies hovered as if suspended in glass. Their eyes were open, but lifeless. All wore stone masks. In the middle was a platform of frozen bone and blood, and on it, Claire. She was not old, not young, but unchanging. Her mouth was murmuring a language that was not of this world. Blood ran backward from her lips, dripping black drops onto the ice, cracking it like glass. Kyle stood beside her, but it was no longer Kyle. He wore a half mask holding a black stone axe. His forehead was carved with a spiral symbol with 6 slashes. He did not look at Ellie until she called his name in her mind. Kyle turned. His eyes were no longer pupils. They were mirrors. "You shouldn't have come. If you open your eyes here, you won't be able to close them again." A faceless child in a yellow raincoat appeared beside Ellie, holding a charred teddy bear. It didn't speak, but Ellie heard it. "You're the last piece. If not you, then who?" Echoes began to rise. The sound of hundreds of people whispering Ellie's name. Voices she had never heard. but all of them knew her. She woke up with a start, in a hospital room. Gabe was missing. Lydia lay unconscious with dried blood around her mouth. There was a bruise on Ellie's neck, 5 fingers as if someone had squeezed her in her sleep. On the table was a burned-out resonator, but a fragment of the sound remained. It knows you, but not through its ears. It learned your name through memory. She opened her pocket. Inside was a photograph that had never been taken. Ellie, Kyle, and Brandon stood together on the riverbank. They were all smiling. But behind them was the open river, and beneath the ice, hundreds of pale hands reaching up. On the back of the photograph was a scrawled line that looked as if it had been written with fingernails. When you smiled at the cold mirror, you chose. It began not with a scream, but with a sigh, soft, but enough to send a chill down her spine. Ellie found herself standing before the Missouri River. The snow fell silently like human ash, covering the ice. But strangely, the ice was no longer a mirror. It was a pale curtain of flesh, trembling as if it were breathing. From deep within, hundreds of eyes opened. Not human eyes, but dark hollows, screaming silently. And Ellie could feel it. They were crying, not with water, but with memories. She woke with a start in the hospital, the smell of antiseptic mixed with the feel of the needle still stuck in the back of her hand. The ceiling was pale. The light bulb was crackling. Lydia was still unconscious in the bed next to her, and the nurse said Ellie had been unconscious for 112 seconds. 112 seconds. Long enough to slip into another dimension and bring something back. Her hospital gown was soaked, but no one knew where. There was no sign of water, no wound, but the smell of mud and rotting algae, as if she had been fished from the bottom of a swamp. In her pocket was an object no one could explain, an old handkerchief embroidered with the initials BW, Brandon Wolfe, and a streak of red lipstick. Ellie never wore lipstick, but that lipstick she had seen on the lips of the woman in the cold mirror. Haunted by this detail, Ellie decided to return to Ruth's abandoned house. No one had touched it since Ruth disappeared. The door was unlocked, but it was so cold that her breath smoked on the broken glass. In the middle of the dining room table, an old notebook lay open, its pages yellowed. On it was a line of words scrawled as if written in haste. Don't cry with your eyes, cry with your soul, because tears will usually melt, but the tears of the dead will be engraved on any mirror of ice. Below it was an old photo, Ellie holding a baby wrapped in a yellow scarf. But she had never had a baby. She had never known the baby's face. And on the back of the photo were the words, choose, hold it or let it go. Ellie went to Brandon's mother, Vivian Wolfe. She lived alone and the house was filled with photos of Brandon. Brandon smiling, Brandon taking pictures, Brandon on the mountain, Brandon by the river. But what made Ellie shiver was, in all the photos, Brandon was always looking away from the lens. His eyes were to the right, as if he was watching someone, or something, outside the frame. Vivian said, her voice breaking, one night I dreamed that he came back, standing in the window, but his eyes were lifeless, and he was crying. But not because he was in pain, because he knew I didn't recognize him anymore. Ellie returned home. On the table was an unmarked package. Inside was Gabe's voice recorder, still charred, but with a memory card attached. She plugged it into her computer. A single recording. Gabe's voice was hoarse. Ellie, if you hear this, it means I can't come back. But you must know, the child in the yellow raincoat is not a ghost. It is a memory built from regret. Don't believe it. Don't believe its eyes. At the same time, a child's voice rang out from the headphones. Sister, have you forgotten me? Ellie knew there was only one way to end the nightmare. Back to the Missouri River, where it had all begun, and perhaps where it would end. That night, the snow was as thick as a shroud. She wore a sweater, a BW handkerchief, and a picture of the baby tucked into her collar. She stepped out into the middle of the river. The ice didn't crack. It welcomed her like a warm blanket, even though it was 10 below zero. She knelt, no incantation, no prayer, just crying. The tears fell, seeping into the ice, And from there, tiny cracks began to widen, forming a circle like an opening eye. A figure emerged from the center of the circle. Not Claire, not Kyle, but Ellie herself. Another version. Her eyes were lifeless. Her hair was long enough to touch the ground. Each step left a trail of blood on the ice. The self stepped forward, holding out her hand. I am you, if you stay. You are me, if you let go. So, what do you choose? At that moment, the ice broke. Not into pieces, but as if peeled off. Below was a dark corridor, leading down to a place where time did not exist. Ellie slid down, unable to resist. She woke up in a watery space, where light was breathing and sound was warmth. In the middle was a woman in a tattered wedding dress, her back turned. In her arms was a baby wrapped in a yellow scarf. Ellie stepped forward. Her heart was pounding. She turned her head. It was Claire, but her face changed. With each blink, it was someone else. Kyle, Ruth, Brandon, Lydia, Gabe, her mother, and herself. She said, I kept them because you refused to remember. You erased the pain, but the pain did not go away. It became me, and I became the last refuge for the tears that could not be shed. Claire handed the baby to Ellie. She took it, and at that moment the water receded. She was no longer wet. She was no longer cold. She was empty. The baby wasn't crying, but its eyes were melting into words. Each word was the name of a missing person. Ellie screamed, Don't! Don't make me remember everything! But it was too late. The next morning, Ellie was found on the riverbank, holding a newborn baby who no one knew where it had come from. The baby's eyes were wide open, black as the river and deep as the abyss. Ellie survived, but she could no longer remember anyone. Kyle, Lydia, Brandon, Gabe. She could not remember her own name, but every night she dreamed of falling into a warm stream. And someone whispered, Don't cry with your tears, cry with your heart, because your tears will be your last call. No one knows what pulled Ellie back from the brink of death, but everyone senses it. She didn't really come back alone. 7 days have passed since the night Ellie appeared on the Missouri shore with an unknown child. Riverview has never been quieter, unnaturally quiet. The wind no longer howls through the cracks in the windows. The streetlights don't flicker like they used to, but it's that silence that keeps many people awake. The baby has no papers, no fingerprints, and no response to anyone but Ellie. Doctors call him a strange baby, and the internet, since a photo of him and Ellie unexpectedly appeared on an anonymous forum, has given him a chilling name, the Reflection Born. Ellie suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, but in her mind, fragments of images still surface every time she closes her eyes. A circle of human ash, fingers digging into thin ice, Kyle's lifeless eyes, and an arm, cold as ice, pulled her out of the river. But it wasn't a human hand. Ellie had the same dream every night. She was rocking her baby to sleep in a room full of cracked mirrors. Each mirror reflected a different version of herself. Some smiling, some crying, some rotting. And one reflected nothing at all. In the dream, the baby whisperer, You're not me, but I'm the child of all the forgotten memories. The first strange scene happened on the 8th night. All the mirrors in the medical center cracked together for a moment. No sound, no impact. Cracks radiated from the center, as if an invisible heart were beating behind the glass. Lydia, her only surviving friend, asked permission to see Ellie. But when she entered, she collapsed. Not because of Ellie, but because of the baby in her arms. It had grown, inexplicably. In just a few days, it had gone from a newborn to a 6-year-old girl. Its eyes were black as coal, bottomless. When Lydia called Ellie's name, the child tilted her head and said, There's no one by that name anymore. Her dreams are mine now. The next morning, all the electronic equipment in the hospital began broadcasting. A lullaby no one recognized. No words, just the sound of breathing through the cracks in the door, footsteps on water. In Ellie's room, Nurse Angela sees something that drives her crazy. The child is standing in front of a mirror, and Inside the mirror, Ellie is sitting and rocking a skeleton doll, while Ellie outside stands frozen, eyes blank. Angela runs away. In her drawer, people find a handwritten note. It never sleeps. And when it rocks, you have to wake up. The news spreads, the media gets involved. But every record related to Ellie, the child, or even the medical center, disappears from the system, as if they never existed. Social media is flooded with collages, fake videos, psychic theories. But there is only one real clip, and it only appears for 3 minutes on the forum The Abyss Net. The video shows a flooded room. The walls are covered with mirrors. In the middle is Ellie in a wedding dress, rocking the baby sitting in a circle of black ash. The child laughed, then spoke in 100 voices stacked on top of each other. This is where the forgotten come to survive. Every time the mirror cracks, a new world is rewritten. A twist occurred when Lydia flipped through an old notebook belonging to Ruth, her missing grandmother. In it was a page that read, "The child was not born, it was created, from the tears of souls buried under ice." Ellie is no longer Ellie. She is a copy of an extinct memory. And she is the one who will choose who is remembered and who is forgotten. Lydia gasped. She understood. If the child could rewrite memories, then everyone, including herself, might not be themselves. 3 nights later, Lydia dreamed that she was singing to the child, but the singing voice was not hers. It was Ellie's. In the mirror beside her, she saw Ellie writing a name, Lydia Hayes. Lydia woke up with a start. She looked up the name in the civil record system, and what she found made her blood run cold. Ellie Hayes didn't exist, but Lydia Hayes was the real name of a girl who went missing in 1995, presumed drowned in the Missouri River. The last photo of that girl was taken next to a woman who looked very much like Ellie now. The final scene of the episode is Ellie sitting alone in a white room. In front of her is a broken mirror. She looks into the mirror, and the child looks back. I want to remember, but remembering means giving up. Now put me to sleep, and the world will forget its fear." Ellie smiled, but tears were streaming from her eyes. She began to sing, "Sleep, my child, the night is coming. Every sob is a buried memory. When I sing, someone disappears." Ever since the night Ellie sang the song that didn't belong in this world to her baby, everything in Riverview has gone haywire. No one knows what time it is. Clocks have stopped, but the sun still rises, just not in the right order. There are mornings that last 2 minutes, sunsets that last 10 hours. And worst of all, some people wake up in other people's homes. No one understands what's going on, but they all have the same symptom, intermittent amnesia. Each has forgotten something important, the name of their child, the day their wife died, or even why they came to this town in the first place. Gabe is the only one left who has seen the world under the ice. After disappearing in season 4, he's suddenly back, skinny, bearded, hollow-eyed, always wearing a helmet even when he's indoors. He shows up at Lydia's house at 2 a.m., knocks 3 times, says nothing. When Lydia opened the door, Gabe pulled a photo from his pocket, Ellie rocking a baby to a mirror. But in the mirror, the one rocking the baby was Lydia. "It's not her, it's you," Gabe said hoarsely. Lydia led him inside, but Gabe didn't sit. He just stood, staring at every reflective surface. The TV, the glass, the glass. They don't sleep anymore, and every time they look in the mirror, they change places. "They?" Lydia whispered. Gabe took off his helmet. Underneath it was a deep scar, running from his left temple to the top of his head. He leaned in close and whispered, "There's a voice inside me. It won't let me forget. Do you remember Ruth?" "Yes." "No, you're just imagining it. Because Ruth never existed, just like Lydia, was never born in this town." Lydia frozen. That night, Gabe told her everything. He wasn't missing. He was pulled to the other side of the cold mirror, where time does not move forward, but repeats like an echo. There, every people caught in a loop of memories that repeats itself over and over again, but not their own. Everyone relives the moment of someone else's death. Once I was Ruth. I hid under the bed, listening to the gasps of being strangled. Once I was Kyle, drowned by Claire. I saw Ellie rock me and left, but when she came back, she was wearing a helmet. Wearing a helmet? It's a way to block out other people's memories. Twist arrived the next morning. Lydia woke up wearing a helmet, but not remembering ever wearing one. A bruise on her neck like a small hand squeezed her. In the bathroom mirror reflected not Lydia, but Ellie with red, swollen eyes, mouth moving. You are me, but at the wrong time, and I am you, but with the wrong child. She smashed the mirror. There was no wall inside. It was a long hallway covered in white tiles, framed with pictures. Each photo is of a person who went missing in Missouri, all of them wearing helmets. Lydia decides to do the unthinkable, find Ellie. She and Gabe return to the abandoned psychiatric ward north of Riverview, where Ellie lived before being discharged without a record. The building is dusty, the iron doors rusty, but inside everything is new, as if it's still working, just hidden from view. In the records room, they find a leather notebook with a frozen eye symbol. Inside is a list of special patients, EHW. Experiment 13, multidimensional memory fragmentation, failed. GBK, memory synchronization, uncontrolled. LVH, alternate ego, unknown. And next to Ellie's name was a scrawled handwriting, escaped. Planting memories in another host. Must break the loop before the mirror map is complete. Gabe began to lose control. He heard the lullaby in his head, even though no one was singing. He knelt in the middle of the hallway, holding his head in his hands. She's rewriting me. She's rewriting every moment I was someone else. The ground shook. The mirrors in the room cracked into tiny pieces. But they didn't fall. They floated, spinning around Lydia. One stopped, reflecting on her wedding dress, pointing a gun at a child wrapped in a yellow blanket. The child looked up. It was her. Lydia screamed. Gabe screamed, banging his head against the wall to stop the lullaby. His helmet shattered, and then he fell silent. Blood poured down his ears, but his eyes were brighter than ever. She's not Ellie, and I'm not Gabe. Gabe, or whatever was left of him, laughed. We are the duplicates created every time the mirror cracks, and you, Lydia, are the last link. When you remember everything, the loop ends, or starts again with someone else. Gabe squeezed Lydia's neck, groaning. She said, only one of us can keep the memories. I choose. Me. With a knee, Lydia knocked him over, running outside. But when she opened the door, she found not a hallway but an icy forest, with mirrors hanging like leaves. On each mirror was a different version of herself. A Lydia in a wheelchair, a Lydia lying on an operating table, a Lydia rocking her baby, and a Lydia wearing a helmet, smiling, welcome back. Now, it's your turn to rock. The final twist of the episode was Lydia waking up, lying on the sofa in Ellie's living room. Everything was normal. The TV was on the news. No cracked mirror, no Gabe. She laughed, tears welling in her eyes. Just a nightmare. She touched her head. A helmet. The television screen changed channels, uncontrolled. It showed Ellie holding the baby, smiling into the camera. Go to sleep. Don't think about it. Because next time, you'll be the one to disappear. Lydia survived her encounter with Gabe, or whatever had been Gabe. But what she brought out of that maze of mirrors was more than just a haunting. It was something more dangerous. Memories that weren't hers were beginning to resurface in her own mind. 3 days later, Lydia locked herself in the attic room in Ellie's house that had served as their makeshift lab. She didn't dare look in the mirror. Every pane of glass in the house was covered in black cloth or painted over with ink. But that didn't stop the dreams from coming back, or rather, the memories. Once falling asleep next to the burned reflective map, Lydia found herself standing in the middle of a white hospital room. On the bed, it was herself, but with jet black hair, dark skin, and 6-fingered hands. Next to her was a doctor, without a face, and on his forehead engraved, "As long as you forget, I will survive." That night, Lydia woke up to a small noise, the light click of boots on wood. Not too loud, but steady. She took the pocket knife from under her pillow and walked out of the room. The house was as quiet as a tomb, but the kitchen light was still on. Under the pale yellow light, a woman sat with her back turned, long silver white hair, wearing an old woolen dress, her shoulders shaking slightly as if she were crying. "Ellie?" Lydia called, trembling. The woman did not answer. Lydia approached, walking very quietly, the knife hidden behind her back. When she put her hand on her shoulder, the woman turned her head and no face. Lydia backed away, horrified. But before she could scream, the figure disappeared. On the chair, only a faded old photo remained. In it, Lydia, Ellie, Kyle, and a stranger wearing a helmet, holding a stuffed rabbit. On the back of the photo was written, "They come from a place that has no name, and they'll be gone when you remember you were there." The first twist came at 3:23 a.m. Lydia heard the front door open. She rushed down the stairs, knife ready, but only saw a boy standing in the doorway. He was wearing a yellow raincoat soaked with water, his eyes were pale green, and his hands were clutching a charcoal drawing of a house. "Are you Lydia?" His voice was shaky, almost breathless. "Yes, I am your child." Lydia's whole body froze. It couldn't be. She had never given birth. But when she touched the boy's hand, a flood of memories came crashing down like a tsunami. She, in a treatment room, screaming in despair as the doctor pulled the baby from her arms. Ellie stood behind the glass, not shedding a tear, just nodding. And then, the mirror cracked. The memory shattered. Lydia knelt down, holding the baby. But when she looked up, it was gone. In her hand was only a drawing paper, a picture of a black hole, and a line scrawled in red chalk. "If you don't remember, someone else will." In a turmoil of emotions, Lydia decided to do the last taboo. Open the mirror. She chose the smallest mirror, a fragment saved from the basement explosion. And when she looked into it, what she saw was not herself, but a woman in hospital clothes, her head shaved, her hands bound, screaming inside a white cell. She opened her mouth, but there was no sound. But Lydia reads lips. "I am you. I am the original. You are just a supporting character." Rewritten. This revelation causes Lydia's world to collapse. If she is not the original, then who created her? And for what purpose? At that moment, a strange sound came from the basement. Not a sound, but a melody, like a music box turned upside down, playing a distorted lullaby over and over again. Lydia goes down. The basement is no longer the same. It has become a circular room with walls made of thousands of spiral mirrors. Each mirror reflects a different Lydia, old, young, crazy, normal, monstrous. All whisper at the same time. "The writer is coming. He will choose you or erase you." In the center of the mirror room, a crimson armchair, and on it, a man in a gray suit, bald, holding a leather notebook with the symbol of the ISI. "Sit, Lydia." His voice sounded as if it were not coming from her mouth, but from inside her head. "Who are you?" She stepped back. "The chronicler, the memory copier, the role adjuster, the story maker. So the world doesn't fall apart. But you're throwing it off axis." Twist 2. Lydia wasn't the first to resist. Ellie had been one. Ruth had been one. Gabe had been one. But every time they realized the truth, their memories would be fragmented and reused into new characters. Lydia had somehow kept them all, and that scared the chronicler. "Do you want to live, or do you want to know the truth?" he asked. Lydia chose the truth, and the real nightmare began. She was pulled back into the central mirror, through a million images, hearing the screams of people who had been her, who had believed they were real. But it was all a script, repeated until the perfect role came. Lydia fell into a dark hallway where a woman in a helmet waited. The figure turned, and it was her, but not human. Skin frozen, eyes without pupils, a smile that ripped her cheeks. "Now you remember, so you choose. Continue or destroy," Lydia screamed. She chose to end it. She threw herself at her reflection, pulling them both against the mirror. The light shattered. The faces she had seen melted. Memories shattered, mingled. Lydia woke, naked in the snow on the Missouri River, homeless, alone, a rolled-up piece of paper in her hand. The roll is over. The next story will not include Lydia. In the distance, she saw a figure walking onto the ice. A child, a yellow raincoat, a stuffed rabbit. And this time, it was not alone, and dragged along a woman in a helmet. As Lydia screamed, the ice began to crack. Snow fell softly on the Missouri River, casting a hazy veil over the desolate landscape. But the cold that night was not normal. It penetrated deep into the bones, seeping into the cracks of memories Lydia had thought locked away. She stood alone at the old turnoff that led to the riverside cabin, where Ruth had warned her, "It's awake." The wind blew, carrying a small laugh. Not adult, not male, not female, but childish. A harsh sound, but strangely lingering, like a call from her subconscious. Lydia looked down at the ice. There was a small handprint imprinted just beneath her feet. Then another. Then a whole row. She had seen them in her dreams, tiny hands rising from beneath the ice, as if trying to cling to the world. But this was not a dream. They were leading the way. Lydia followed the handprints. The path leads to an old wooden house, the roof tilted to one side, the door wide open as if someone had run away in a hurry. Inside, dust is everywhere. But in the middle of the room, a tiny pink dress hangs on the wall, swaying in the wind. She steps closer. Beneath the dress is a piece of paper pinned to the wall with a rusty pin. She still doesn't remember. When she smiles in the mirror, that's when we know we've erased enough. A clatter in the attic makes Lydia jump. She pulls a small knife from her pocket, slowly climbing the rotten wooden steps. Up there, in the dim light filtering through the planks, stands a little girl with her back turned. She's wearing an old pink dress, holding a stuffed rabbit with one eye missing. "Child," Lydia calls softly. The child doesn't move. "What's your name?" Silence. "You. Are you Isabel?" The child slowly turned her head, but her face, empty. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a pale white mask. Then from somewhere came a deep, indistinguishable voice. "You know who you are, but they don't want you to remember." Lydia gasped, her heart clenched. She looked back at the pink dress. For the first time in her life, she realized. She had worn it. She had been that child. She had been Isabel. She had been one of the rewritten children. Memories flooded back. The sound of needles, windowless rooms, men in white shirts saying the same. Program phrases, "Don't remember, no name, just be quiet." One scene came most vividly. Her mother, the only one who believed the girl wasn't crazy, screaming helplessly as she was dragged out of the therapy room. She left a small box. Inside was a photograph of her in a pink dress. And on the back of the photo was written, "Isabel, if you remember, you are still you." The attic began to change. Mirrors rose from the walls, reflecting Lydia. But each image was a different version. The medical student, the paranoid young woman, the mentally ill patient, the accident victim. But none of them were Isabel. Only the last mirror reflected nothing. The child in the pink dress stood before the empty mirror. Then she reached out, took off the white mask. Underneath was Lydia's own face, but Lydia as a 6-year-old. "You left me. Now I don't know who I am. They say I don't exist. I'm just a shadow." You smile. That's when they know you've forgotten enough to be safe. Lydia fell to her knees, holding her head, her breathing ragged. The cabin vanished in a flash, leaving her alone in the snowy plains. Before her was the Missouri River, still frozen. But this time in the clear ice, she saw Isabel's face. Close up from below, tears streaming upward. A sudden twist. She realized that Isabel wasn't the buried memory. Lydia was the constructed identity. All her friends, her past, her school, her hospital. They were all strings of memories implanted into her brain by experimental memory formatting technology. Ellie, Ruth, Gabe, None of them had ever truly existed. They were just companion software, programmed to keep Isabel's new self in a stable state. But the system was starting to crack because Isabel was remembering. A voice from the sky spoke down, cold and steady. Subject Z13 has crossed the threshold of stability. The original memory is reestablishing itself. Emergency eraser activated. The ice cracked. Huge fissures appeared. And from the bottom of the river, mechanical devices emerged. Metal arms, cables, mine submersion systems. All of them rushed toward Isabel. She didn't run. She looked straight into the gray sky, then grabbed the hand of the child in the pink dress. You are me. I am you. We are real. Everything exploded into white light. Isabel woke up in an empty gray room. On the walls were rows of mirrors. All of them reflected her alone. But she smiled. Not because she had been programmed, but because she finally remembered her real name. My name is Isabel, and I will not be erased again. A small crack appeared on the mirror. Then it spread. Then all the mirrors shattered. The room disappeared. Do you feel the cold creeping into your skin? Not from the wind, not from the snow and ice, but from an invisible fear, as if someone is standing right behind you. Not touching, not speaking, just looking. When Isabel crushed the mirror and said, I will not be erased again, did you realize we too are living in a reality filled with programmed memories? Do you remember all of your childhood, the blurry faces, the strange gaps, the recurring dreams as if someone had reprogrammed your memory? Maybe you think it's just a coincidence, but after this story, are you still sure? Maybe you've never been to the Missouri River. Maybe you've never seen a child in a pink dress standing silently in the snow. But if one day, when you take a selfie and find behind you a face you don't remember standing there, would you still think this story is fiction? There are things in this world that should not be dug up. There are memories that should not be rehashed. And there are smiles that should not be photographed. The lesson? Never ignore those strange feelings inside you. The unusual cold, the recurring nightmare, or when you feel like you're being watched, don't ignore them. Because sometimes they're more than just feelings, they're warnings. And if you ever see a child standing still in the night, faceless, eyeless, don't approach, don't ask for its name, because maybe it's looking for someone to take its place. Thank you for watching until the end. If you feel the shivers, if you feel the dread creeping up your spine, hit that like button so we know you're still here. Subscribe to Darkness Tells so you don't miss any stories that will make you question the reality you're living in. And don't forget to share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness with you. Are you ready for the next part? Because when you hit continue, you may have just opened a door that should have been locked.